Question 1. The monitoring system demonstrates a critical service outage requiring immediate intervention. The IT operations team identifies a configuration error as the root cause and performs a direct modification to the affected system to restore service. Following the restoration, the team plans to document the change and submit it for approval, which approach best aligns with regulatory compliance and the principles of change configuration release management as implemented within IBM SmartCloud Control Desk v7. 5. Option A. Assume the incident was minor and therefore did not require formal change documentation, proceeding with the fix without any formal change record. Option B. Immediately initiate a formal emergency change request. Document all actions taken during the incident resolution within the emergency change record and proceed with the fix. Option C. Document the actions taken only after the service has been restored and then initiate a formal change request for retrospective approval. Option D. Perform the fix without any documentation and plan to retroactively create a standard change request later for audit purposes. Correct answer is B. Immediately initiate a formal emergency change request. Document all actions taken during the incident resolution within the emergency change record and proceed with the fix. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for operational stability with the long-term imperative of regulatory compliance and auditable evidence. The pressure to resolve an incident quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise the integrity of change records, which are critical for demonstrating adherence to established processes and for post-incident analysis. The challenge lies in ensuring that all actions taken, even under duress, are properly documented and aligned with the defined change configuration release management implementation framework, as per IBM SmartCloud Control Desk v7. 5. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach, which involves immediately initiating a formal emergency change request and documenting all actions taken during the incident resolution, represents best professional practice. This aligns directly with the principles of robust change configuration release management. Regulatory frameworks, including those implicitly governed by ITIL best practices often adopted in enterprise environments like those using IBM SmartCloud Control Desk, mandate auditable trails for all system modifications. Promptly creating an emergency change record ensures that the deviation from standard procedures is acknowledged, justified, and tracked. Documenting all actions taken during the resolution provides the necessary evidence for post-incident review, compliance audits, and future process improvement. This approach upholds transparency, accountability, and the integrity of the change management process, which are fundamental to maintaining a stable and compliant IT environment. Incorrect approaches analysis. Failing to initiate an emergency change request and instead documenting actions only after the fact represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach bypasses the formal approval and risk assessment inherent in the emergency change process, potentially leading to unauthorized or unvetted modifications. It creates a gap in the auditable record, making it difficult to demonstrate compliance with change management policies during an audit. Furthermore, it undermines the principle of proactive risk management, as the change was not assessed for its potential impact before implementation. Assuming the incident was minor, and therefore did not require formal change documentation, is another regulatory and ethical failure. The definition of what constitutes a minor incident that bypasses change control is often strictly defined by organizational policy and regulatory requirements. Without a formal process to assess the impact and necessity of a change, even seemingly minor interventions can have unforeseen consequences or violate compliance mandates. This approach relies on subjective judgment rather than objective process, increasing the risk of noncompliance and audit failures. Proceeding with the fix without any documentation and planning to retroactively create a standard change request later is a severe regulatory and ethical failure. This completely disregards the immediate need for an auditable record of an unplanned system modification. It creates a significant risk of noncompliance, as the change was implemented without the required oversight, risk assessment, and approval. Retroactive documentation is often considered insufficient by auditors and regulators, as it does not reflect the actual sequence of events and decision-making during the incident. This approach prioritizes speed over control and compliance, which is unacceptable in a regulated environment. Professional reasoning. Professionals in IT service management, particularly those implementing and managing solutions like IBM SmartCloud Control Desk, must adopt a decision-making process that prioritizes adherence to established governance frameworks. When faced with an incident requiring immediate action, the first step should be to assess if the required action constitutes a change. If it does, and the urgency necessitates bypassing standard change windows, an emergency change process must be initiated. This involves understanding the organization's specific change management policies and regulatory obligations. Professionals should always err on the side of caution, opting for formal documentation and approval processes, even under pressure. The ability to justify deviations through a documented emergency change process is paramount for maintaining operational integrity and meeting compliance requirements. Post-incident reviews should then focus on identifying opportunities to prevent future emergencies and refine the change management process. Question 2. Examination of the data shows that a critical security patch needs to be deployed to a production server within the next 2 hours to mitigate an active threat. The standard change management process in IBM SmartCloud Control Desk v7.5 requires a minimum of 24 hours for impact assessment and approval. Which of the following actions best aligns with regulatory compliance and best professional practice for managing this urgent change? Option A. Inform the security team of the threat and await their guidance on whether to bypass the change management process entirely for this deployment. Option B. Proceed with deploying the security patch immediately, documenting the change retrospectively in IBM SmartCloud Control Desk v7.5 as an emergency change and notifying relevant stakeholders after deployment. Option C. Initiate the standard change management process, requesting expedited review and approval within the 2-hour window, and deferring the deployment until full approval is obtained. Option D. Deploy the security patch without formal documentation or approval in IBM SmartCloud Control Desk v7.5, relying on verbal confirmation from the IT manager to proceed. The correct answer is B. Proceed with deploying the security patch immediately, documenting the change retrospectively in IBM SmartCloud Control Desk v7.5 as an emergency change, and notifying relevant stakeholders after deployment. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for rapid change implementation with the imperative of maintaining regulatory compliance and auditability within the IBM SmartCloud Control Desk v7.5 environment. The core tension lies in ensuring that all changes, even those perceived as minor or urgent, are properly documented and approved according to established governance frameworks, which are often dictated by regulatory requirements for change management and configuration control. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it adheres strictly to the established change management process within IBM SmartCloud Control Desk, which is designed to meet regulatory compliance standards. This involves thorough documentation of the change, assessment of its impact, obtaining necessary approvals, and scheduling it appropriately. This systematic approach ensures that all changes are traceable, auditable, and have undergone risk assessment, thereby minimizing the likelihood of unauthorized modifications or service disruptions that could lead to regulatory noncompliance. Adherence to these processes is critical for demonstrating due diligence to auditors and regulatory bodies. An incorrect approach that bypasses formal approval processes for urgent changes fails to meet regulatory requirements for auditable change control. This creates a significant risk of unauthorized modifications, potential security vulnerabilities, and service instability, all of which can lead to regulatory penalties and reputational damage. Such an approach demonstrates a disregard for established governance and can be interpreted as a failure to implement adequate internal controls, a common requirement in many regulatory frameworks governing IT operations. Another incorrect approach that relies solely on informal communication for urgent changes is also professionally unacceptable. Speed is important. Informal communication lacks the necessary audit trail and accountability. Regulatory bodies often require documented evidence of approvals and risk assessments. Relying on informal methods makes it impossible to demonstrate compliance during an audit and increases the risk of miscommunication or overlooked critical steps, leading to unintended consequences and potential breaches of regulatory mandates. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the organization's established change management policies and procedures, which are themselves designed to align with relevant regulatory frameworks. When faced with an urgent change, a professional should first assess the true urgency and impact. If the change is genuinely critical and cannot wait for the standard process, they should then consult the defined escalation paths within the change management framework. This might involve seeking emergency approval from designated authorities, ensuring that even emergency changes are logged and documented retrospectively according to policy. The key is to operate within the spirit and letter of the regulations and internal controls, even when under pressure. Question 3. Performance analysis shows that a recent configuration change implemented via IBM SmartCloud Control Desk v7.5 has significantly improved system responsiveness, but has also introduced a critical security vulnerability that could expose sensitive customer data. The business is demanding an immediate restoration of the previous performance levels, while the security team is flagging the urgent need to patch the vulnerability. Which of the following actions best aligns with regulatory compliance and professional best practices for managing this situation? Option A. Immediately revert the configuration change to its previous state to eliminate the security vulnerability and restore system stability, then initiate a separate process to investigate and address the performance improvement opportunity securely. Option B. Prioritize the security vulnerability by isolating the affected system, conducting a thorough root cause analysis of the vulnerability, and developing a remediation plan that addresses both the security flaw and the performance enhancement, ensuring compliance with all relevant security policies and regulations before implementation. Option C. Implement a quick, temporary fix for the security vulnerability without extensive testing to allow the improved performance to continue, and schedule a full review of the security implications at a later date. Option D. Focus solely on restoring the system to its original performance levels by reverting the change, and inform the security team that the performance improvement is no longer a priority due to the security risk. The correct answer is A. Immediately revert the configuration change to its previous state to eliminate the security vulnerability and restore system stability, then initiate a separate process to investigate and address the performance improvement opportunity securely. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT service management where a critical change, intended to improve system performance, has inadvertently introduced a security vulnerability. The professional challenge lies in balancing the urgency of addressing the performance issue with the paramount need to maintain system security and regulatory compliance. The pressure to restore service quickly can lead to rushed decisions that overlook critical security implications, potentially exposing sensitive data or disrupting business operations. Careful judgment is required to ensure that remediation efforts do not create new risks or violate established security policies and regulatory mandates. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a structured incident response that prioritizes security and compliance. This means immediately isolating the affected system to prevent further exploitation, conducting a thorough root cause analysis to understand the security vulnerability introduced by the change, and then developing a remediation plan that addresses both the performance issue and the security flaw. This plan must be reviewed against relevant IBM SmartCloud Control Desk v7.5 change configuration release management implementation guidelines and any applicable regulatory frameworks, e.g., data privacy laws, industry-specific security standards, to ensure it is compliant and secure. The remediation should then be implemented under strict change control procedures, followed by comprehensive testing and validation to confirm both performance improvements and the closure of the security gap. This methodical approach aligns with best practices for incident management and change control, ensuring that security and compliance are not compromised in the pursuit of operational improvements. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately revert the change without a proper investigation. While this might seem like a quick fix for the performance issue, it fails to address the underlying security vulnerability that was introduced. This could leave the system exposed to future attacks if the same change is attempted again, without understanding the security implications. It also bypasses the structured incident response and change control processes, which are designed to prevent such occurrences and ensure proper documentation and learning. Another incorrect approach is to focus solely on restoring the original performance levels without adequately assessing and mitigating the security vulnerability. This demonstrates a failure to prioritize security, which is a fundamental requirement in IT operations and often mandated by regulations. Ignoring or downplaying the security risk, even if it doesn't lead to an immediate breach, is a significant ethical and professional failing, as it exposes the organization to potential data loss, reputational damage, and legal penalties. A third incorrect approach is to implement a quick patch for the security vulnerability, without fully understanding its impact on the system's performance or other functionalities. This reactive measure might address the immediate security concern, but could introduce new performance degradations or functional issues, leading to a cycle of reactive fixes rather than a stable, secure, and performant system. It also likely bypasses proper change control and testing procedures, increasing the risk of further disruptions. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to incident management and change control. When a performance issue arises from a change, the first step is to assess the impact, which includes both operational performance and security. A structured incident response framework, such as that supported by IBM SmartCloud Control Desk, should be followed. This framework typically involves identification, containment, eradication, and recovery. Crucially, security and compliance checks must be integrated into every stage. Professionals should always consult relevant documentation, policies, and regulatory requirements before implementing any remediation. Decision-making should be guided by the principle of least privilege and defense in depth, ensuring that solutions are robust, secure, and compliant, even under pressure to restore service. Question 4. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a proposed configuration change in IBM SmartCloud Control Desk v7.5 will result in significant immediate cost savings by reducing manual intervention. However, the analysis has not fully explored the potential impact of this change on existing regulatory compliance, reporting mechanisms, and data integrity controls. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of change configuration release management implementation under the specified regulatory framework? Option A. Implement the change with a limited scope, focusing only on the areas directly related to cost savings, and monitor for any compliance deviations. Option B. Defer the change until a comprehensive impact assessment is completed, including a thorough review of its effects on all regulatory compliance reporting and data integrity controls. Option C. Proceed with the change immediately to realize the cost savings and address any compliance issues that may arise retrospectively. Option D. Document the potential compliance risks but proceed with the change, assuming that existing controls will be sufficient to mitigate any unforeseen issues. Correct answer is C. Proceed with the change immediately to realize the cost savings and address any compliance issues that may arise retrospectively. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate cost savings of a proposed change against the potential long-term risks and regulatory compliance obligations. The IBM Smart Cloud Control Desk v7.5 Change Configuration Release Management Implementation Framework, particularly concerning regulatory compliance, mandates a thorough assessment of all changes, not just those with obvious financial implications. The challenge lies in identifying and quantifying risks that may not have immediate, tangible costs, but could lead to significant penalties or operational disruptions if not addressed. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a comprehensive risk assessment that aligns with regulatory requirements for change management, including a detailed analysis of potential compliance breaches, data security implications, and service disruption impacts. It ensures that the cost-benefit analysis is not solely focused on direct financial outlays, but also on the broader implications of the change. This proactive stance is crucial for adhering to the principles of responsible IT governance and maintaining the integrity of the controlled environment, as expected within the scope of C2010-040. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost reduction without adequately assessing regulatory impact fails to meet the standards of responsible change management. This oversight can lead to specific regulatory failures, such as noncompliance with data protection laws or industry-specific regulations that mandate robust change control processes. Such failures can result in significant fines, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of implementation over thorough risk evaluation also poses a regulatory risk. This can lead to the introduction of vulnerabilities or non-compliant configurations that are only discovered during an audit or incident, leading to retrospective penalties. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework that explicitly incorporates regulatory compliance as a key evaluation criterion. Professionals should always ask, what are the potential regulatory consequences of this change, and how can they be mitigated? This involves consulting relevant regulatory documentation, engaging with compliance officers, and ensuring that all proposed changes are evaluated against a defined set of compliance controls. The goal is to make informed decisions that balance operational efficiency with a strong commitment to regulatory adherence and risk management. Question 5. Analysis of a situation where a critical business application is experiencing a severe outage, impacting revenue generation. The head of sales has urgently requested an immediate fix, which involves a configuration change to a core infrastructure component managed by IBM SmartCloud Control Desk. The proposed change has not undergone the full Change Advisory Board (CAB) review due to the time sensitivity. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure regulatory compliance and minimize risk? Option A. Delay the fix until the full CAB review can be completed, even if it means prolonged business disruption and potential revenue loss. Option B. Initiate an emergency change process, which includes a rapid impact and risk assessment, documented justification for the urgency, and a streamlined approval from designated emergency change approvers, followed by immediate implementation. Option C. Implement the configuration change without any formal documentation or review, relying on the technical team's expertise to resolve the issue quickly. Option D. Proceed with the configuration change immediately, as verbal approval from senior management has been obtained, and document the change retrospectively. The correct answer is D. Proceed with the configuration change immediately, as verbal approval from senior management has been obtained, and document the change retrospectively. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT service management, specifically within change, configuration, and release management, where the pressure to deliver quickly can sometimes conflict with the need for robust regulatory compliance. The professional challenge lies in balancing the urgency of a critical business need with the established processes designed to mitigate risk and ensure auditability. A hasty decision without proper due diligence can lead to significant operational disruptions, security vulnerabilities, and non-compliance with internal policies and potentially external regulations, even if not explicitly stated in this exam's jurisdiction. The principles of good governance and risk management are universally applicable. Correct approach emphasizes adherence to the established change management process, including thorough impact assessment, risk analysis, and appropriate approvals. This aligns with best professional practice because it ensures that changes are managed in a controlled and documented manner, minimizing the likelihood of unintended consequences. By following the defined procedures, the organization maintains an auditable trail, demonstrating due diligence and accountability. This systematic approach is crucial for maintaining the integrity of the IT environment and ensuring business continuity, which are implicit requirements of any responsible IT governance framework. An incorrect approach that bypasses the standard Change Advisory Board (CAB) review for a critical change, even with senior management verbal approval, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It undermines the established governance structure designed to protect the organization from risk. This bypass creates a lack of documented justification and approval, making it impossible to demonstrate compliance during an audit. Furthermore, it sets a dangerous precedent, encouraging future deviations from established processes, which can lead to a breakdown in control and an increase in operational errors and security breaches. Another incorrect approach, such as implementing the change without any form of impact assessment or risk analysis, is even more egregious. This demonstrates a complete disregard for risk management principles and could lead to severe service disruptions, data loss, or security compromises, directly violating the implicit duty of care expected of IT professionals. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes risk assessment and adherence to established governance. When faced with urgent requests, The first step is to understand the business criticality and potential impact. If the urgency necessitates a deviation from standard timelines, the process should still involve a rapid but thorough risk assessment and a documented justification for any expedited steps. This might involve an emergency CAB meeting or a delegated approval process, but it must always be recorded. The decision should be based on a clear understanding of the potential consequences of both implementing and not implementing the change, always within the bounds of established policy and risk appetite. Question 6. The performance metrics show a significant increase in system errors following the deployment of a new application update, and subsequent security scans reveal a critical vulnerability introduced by this update. What is the most appropriate immediate action to take to address this situation, ensuring regulatory compliance and operational stability? Option A. Immediately initiate a rollback of the application update to the previous stable version, followed by a comprehensive root cause analysis and a reevaluation of the change management process for the redeployment. Option B. Implement a quick fix or patch for the identified vulnerability without reverting the application update, aiming to resolve the security issue rapidly. Option C. Proceed with the planned next phase of the application rollout to other environments while simultaneously investigating the vulnerability in the production environment. Option D. Document the vulnerability and plan to address it during the next scheduled maintenance window to minimize disruption to ongoing operations. The correct answer is A. Immediately initiate a rollback of the application update to the previous stable version, followed by a comprehensive root cause analysis and a reevaluation of the change management process for the redeployment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT service management where a critical change, intended to improve system performance, has inadvertently introduced a new vulnerability. The professional challenge lies in balancing the immediate need to restore service and mitigate risk with the long-term implications for compliance and auditability. The pressure to quickly resolve the issue can lead to shortcuts that compromise established processes, potentially violating regulatory requirements and increasing future risk. The interconnectedness of change, configuration, and release management means that a failure in one area can cascade, impacting the integrity of the entire IT environment and its ability to meet compliance obligations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a structured incident response that immediately prioritizes the rollback of the problematic change. This is best professional practice because it directly addresses the immediate risk to the production environment and aligns with the core principles of ITIL Information Technology Infrastructure Library, which underpins IBM SmartCloud Control Desk. Specifically, it adheres to the change management and incident management processes. Rolling back the change ensures that the system is returned to a known, stable, and compliant state, minimizing the window of exposure. Following this with a thorough root cause analysis, RCA, and a reevaluation of the change process is crucial for preventing recurrence and demonstrating due diligence to auditors. This methodical approach ensures that all actions are documented, traceable, and justifiable, which is a fundamental requirement for regulatory compliance and effective governance. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing a quick fix without a rollback is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It leaves the system in a vulnerable state, potentially exposing sensitive data or disrupting critical business functions, which could violate data protection regulations e.g. GDPR if applicable, though not specified for this exam. The principle of data integrity and security is universal in IT governance. This approach bypasses established change control procedures, making it difficult to audit and prove compliance. It also fails to address the underlying cause of the vulnerability, increasing the likelihood of future incidents and potential breaches. Attempting to patch the vulnerability without reverting the change, while seemingly efficient, also represents a failure. This approach risks introducing further instability or conflicts within the system, as the patch is applied to an already compromised configuration. It also bypasses the formal change management process for the rollback, undermining the integrity of the configuration management database, CMDB, and the audit trail. From a compliance perspective, this demonstrates a lack of adherence to controlled deployment practices, which are essential for demonstrating that changes are managed and authorized. Ignoring the vulnerability until the next scheduled maintenance window is a severe dereliction of duty and a clear regulatory and ethical failure. It prioritizes convenience over security and business continuity. This inaction exposes the organization to immediate and ongoing risks, including potential data breaches, service disruptions, and reputational damage. It directly contravenes the principles of proactive risk management and the duty of care expected in IT operations, which are often mandated by various regulatory frameworks concerning operational resilience and security. Professional reasoning. Professionals must adopt a decision-making process that prioritizes risk mitigation and adherence to established governance frameworks. When faced with a critical issue, the first step is to assess the immediate impact and potential for harm. This assessment should then guide the selection of the most appropriate response, always within the bounds of documented procedures and regulatory requirements. The process should involve 1. Immediate containment and stabilization, rollback if necessary. 2. Thorough investigation and root cause analysis. 3. Controlled remediation and redeployment following proper change management. 4. Documentation of all actions and outcomes for audit and continuous improvement. This structured approach ensures that decisions are not reactive but are informed, defensible, and aligned with best practices for maintaining a secure and compliant IT environment. Question 7. Process analysis reveals that a critical business application update is scheduled for deployment. The change request has been submitted with minimal detail regarding potential impacts, and the urgency to implement the update is high due to perceived competitive pressures. The change manager is under pressure to approve the change quickly to meet business demands. Which of the following approaches to risk assessment best aligns with the principles of responsible change configuration release management within the context of IBM SmartCloud Control Desk v7? 5. Option A. Rely on the developer's assurance that the change is risk-free, without independent verification or assessment, due to their perceived expertise. Option B. Defer a comprehensive risk assessment until after the change has been implemented, addressing any issues that arise reactively. Option C. Implement a structured risk assessment process that involves identifying potential risks, analyzing their likelihood and impact, and developing mitigation plans before approving the change for deployment. Option D. Conduct a rapid, high-level risk assessment focusing only on the most obvious technical dependencies, assuming minimal impact if the change is deployed immediately. The correct answer is D. Conduct a rapid, high-level risk assessment focusing only on the most obvious technical dependencies, assuming minimal impact if the change is deployed immediately. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for efficient change implementation with the critical requirement of thorough risk assessment, as mandated by IT governance frameworks and best practices relevant to IBM SmartCloud Control Desk v7. 5. The challenge lies in identifying and mitigating potential negative impacts of a change before it is deployed, thereby preventing service disruptions, data loss, or security breaches. Careful judgment is essential to ensure that risk assessment is not a perfunctory step, but a robust process that informs decision-making. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it aligns with the principles of proactive risk management, a cornerstone of effective IT service management (ITSM), and specifically change configuration release management. By systematically identifying, analyzing, and evaluating risks associated with a proposed change, organizations can make informed decisions about whether to proceed, modify the change, or reject it. This approach minimizes the likelihood of adverse events, ensures business continuity, and upholds the integrity of the IT environment. It directly supports the objectives of IBM SmartCloud Control Desk v7. 5. By enabling controlled and predictable changes. An incorrect approach that bypasses or inadequately performs risk assessment is professionally unacceptable due to several regulatory and ethical failures. Firstly, it violates the implicit or explicit requirements of IT governance frameworks that mandate risk management as a control mechanism. This can lead to noncompliance with internal policies and potentially external regulations if the change impacts regulated data or services. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for the potential harm to the business, its customers, and its stakeholders by knowingly or negligently exposing them to unnecessary risks. This failure to exercise due diligence can result in significant financial losses, reputational damage, and a breach of trust. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured approach to risk management. This includes 1. understanding the context of the change and its potential impact on business operations and services. 2. Identifying all potential risks, both technical and non-technical, associated with the change. 3. Analyzing the likelihood and impact of each identified risk to determine its severity. 4. Evaluating the identified risks against predefined risk tolerance levels. 5. Developing and implementing appropriate risk mitigation strategies. 6. Documenting the entire risk assessment process and the decisions made. This systematic process ensures that risk management is integrated into the change lifecycle and supports informed, responsible decision-making. Question 8. Research into the implementation of IBM SmartCloud Control Desk V7. 5. Change configuration release management reveals a proposed critical change to a core financial system. The change is scheduled for a weekend deployment to minimize user impact, but the technical team has identified several potential integration issues that could lead to data corruption if not handled correctly. The project manager is pushing for a rapid deployment, emphasizing the business benefits of the new functionality. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of risk assessment in this context? Option A. Implement the change without a formal risk assessment, assuming that the benefits outweigh the potential risks and that any issues can be resolved quickly by the IT support team. Option B. Defer the deployment to a later date to allow for more extensive testing of the integration points, even though this will delay the realization of the business benefits. Option C. Conduct a detailed risk assessment that identifies potential integration failure points, quantifies their impact on data integrity and business operations, and defines specific rollback and contingency plans before approving the deployment. Option D. Proceed with the deployment as scheduled, relying on the technical team's ability to troubleshoot any issues that arise during the weekend and document lessons learned post-implementation. The correct answer is D. Proceed with the deployment as scheduled, relying on the technical team's ability to troubleshoot any issues that arise during the weekend and document lessons learned post-implementation. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in change configuration release management, balancing the need for rapid deployment with the imperative to thoroughly assess potential risks. The professional challenge lies in identifying and mitigating risks without unduly delaying critical business changes, especially when faced with time constraints and limited resources. Effective risk assessment is not merely a procedural step, but a critical control point that directly impacts the stability, security, and availability of the IT services managed by IBM SmartCloud Control Desk. The correct approach, which involves a structured and documented risk assessment process that considers the impact on business operations, security, and compliance, represents best professional practice. This aligns with the principles of robust IT governance and service management, ensuring that changes are implemented in a controlled manner. Specifically, it upholds the spirit of regulatory frameworks that mandate due diligence in managing IT changes to prevent service disruption and data breaches. By systematically identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities and developing appropriate mitigation strategies, this approach minimizes the likelihood of negative consequences, thereby protecting the organization's assets and reputation. An incorrect approach that bypasses or superficially addresses the risk assessment process is professionally unacceptable due to several regulatory and ethical failures. Firstly, it demonstrates a disregard for established change management procedures, which are often mandated by internal policies and potentially external regulations designed to ensure IT service continuity and data integrity. Secondly, it creates an unacceptable level of risk for the organization. For instance, failing to assess the security implications of a change could lead to vulnerabilities that are exploited, resulting in data breaches, financial losses, and reputational damage, all of which have significant regulatory and legal ramifications. Ethically, it represents a failure to act with due care and diligence in protecting the organization's IT infrastructure and the data it handles. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the organization's risk appetite, the criticality of the change being proposed, and the potential impact of failure. Professionals should always prioritize a documented and auditable risk assessment process. This involves engaging relevant stakeholders, utilizing established risk assessment methodologies, and ensuring that mitigation plans are actionable and effectively implemented. When faced with pressure to expedite a change, The decision to proceed without adequate risk assessment should only be considered in extreme, well-documented emergency situations, and even then, with a retrospective review and robust post-implementation monitoring. The default should always be a thorough, risk-informed decision. Question 9. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a critical security patch for the core business application offers significant long-term financial benefits by preventing potential data breaches. However, the deployment process is complex and has a history of causing unexpected service interruptions during previous similar releases. Given the urgency, what is the most appropriate risk management approach to ensure a successful and controlled deployment? Option A. Proceed with the deployment immediately, focusing on post-deployment monitoring and rapid incident response to address any issues that arise. Option B. Delegate the entire risk assessment responsibility to the development team, assuming they have the necessary expertise and understanding of operational impacts. Option C. Conduct a detailed risk assessment, identifying potential failure points, their likelihood and impact, and develop specific mitigation and contingency plans before proceeding with the deployment. Option D. Postpone the deployment indefinitely until a completely risk-free deployment method can be guaranteed, even if it means delaying the security benefits. The correct answer is A. Proceed with the deployment immediately, focusing on post-deployment monitoring and rapid incident response to address any issues that arise. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for a critical system update with the potential for unforeseen risks that could impact service availability and data integrity. The pressure to deploy quickly, often driven by business demands, can lead to shortcuts in the risk assessment process, which is a cornerstone of effective change and release management. The IBM SmartCloud Control Desk v7.5 framework, as per the C2010-040 exam syllabus, emphasizes a structured approach to managing changes, including thorough risk evaluation, to minimize disruption and ensure compliance. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it adheres to the fundamental principles of risk management embedded within IT service management frameworks like ITIL, which are implicitly supported by the IBM SmartCloud Control Desk v7.5 implementation guidelines. A comprehensive risk assessment involving identification, analysis, and evaluation of potential impacts and likelihoods allows for informed decision-making regarding mitigation strategies, contingency planning, and the ultimate go/no-go decision for the release. This proactive stance minimizes the probability of negative outcomes, protects service continuity, and upholds the organization's commitment to reliable IT operations. An incorrect approach that bypasses or inadequately performs the risk assessment phase would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Specifically, it would violate the implicit requirement for due diligence in managing IT changes, which is essential for maintaining service levels and protecting organizational assets. Such a failure could lead to service outages, data corruption, financial losses, and reputational damage, all of which are direct consequences of neglecting risk management. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for the impact of IT changes on end users and the business, potentially breaching professional codes of conduct that prioritize responsible IT governance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of the proposed change against established risk assessment methodologies. This includes engaging relevant stakeholders to identify potential risks, quantifying the likelihood and impact of these risks, and developing appropriate mitigation plans. If the residual risk is deemed unacceptable, the change should be deferred or modified. Professionals must prioritize adherence to the established change management process, even under pressure, recognizing that a robust risk assessment is not a bureaucratic hurdle, but a critical control mechanism for ensuring successful and responsible IT operations. Question 10. Compliance review shows that a critical security patch needs to be deployed to a production system within the next 2 hours to mitigate an active threat. The standard change management process requires a full risk assessment and CAB approval, which typically takes 24 hours. The emergency change initiator believes they can assess the risks themselves and proceed without formal CAB review to meet the deadline. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. The emergency change initiator should perform a quick personal risk assessment and proceed with the deployment, documenting their decision and rationale afterward. Option B. Proceed with the deployment immediately, as the threat is active and the business impact of not patching is far greater than any potential risks from the change itself. Option C. Expedite the risk assessment process. Document all identified risks and proposed mitigations, and seek emergency approval from designated CAB members or delegates, even if it means a slightly compressed review period. Option D. Inform stakeholders that the standard process cannot be met due to the urgency, and propose delaying the patch deployment until the next scheduled change window to ensure full compliance. The correct answer is C. Expedite the risk assessment process, document all identified risks and proposed mitigations, and seek emergency approval from designated CAB members or delegates, even if it means a slightly compressed review period. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for rapid change implementation with the imperative of thorough risk assessment. Core tenet of IT service management frameworks like ITIL, which underpins IBM SmartCloud Control Desk. The pressure to deploy a critical fix quickly can lead to shortcuts in the risk assessment process, potentially exposing the organization to significant operational, security, or compliance risks. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the urgency of the situation does not override the fundamental controls designed to protect the business. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it acknowledges the urgency while still adhering to the established risk management process. By involving the Change Advisory Board (CAB) and performing a documented risk assessment, even under time constraints, the team ensures that potential impacts are identified, evaluated, and mitigated. This aligns with the principles of responsible change management, which mandate a structured approach to minimize disruption and protect service availability and integrity. Regulatory compliance, while not explicitly detailed in the prompt for a specific jurisdiction, generally requires organizations to demonstrate due diligence in managing IT changes and their associated risks. This approach provides that demonstrable evidence. An incorrect approach that bypasses the CAB and relies solely on the emergency change initiator's judgment fails to leverage collective expertise and oversight. This is a significant ethical and professional failure, as it concentrates decision-making power without adequate checks and balances, increasing the likelihood of overlooking critical risks. It also undermines the established governance processes designed to protect the organization. Another incorrect approach that proceeds with the change without any documented risk assessment, even if the initiator believes the risk is low, is professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a disregard for due diligence and a failure to adhere to standard operating procedures, potentially leading to unforeseen consequences and a breach of implicit or explicit service level agreements or regulatory obligations. It also leaves no audit trail for the decision-making process. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established processes, even under pressure. This involves understanding the criticality of the change, assessing the potential impact of not implementing it versus the risks of implementing it without full due diligence, and escalating concerns if the process cannot be followed. In urgent situations, the framework should include provisions for expedited risk assessment and CAB review, rather than outright bypass. The goal is to find the most efficient path that still maintains the integrity of the risk management and change control processes. Question 11. Which approach would be most appropriate for evaluating the potential impact of a proposed infrastructure upgrade that promises enhanced performance but also introduces new software dependencies before its implementation within a regulated environment? Option A. Proceed with the upgrade based on the vendor's assurance of improved performance, assuming any new dependencies will be managed post-implementation. Option B. Rely on the subjective opinions of the IT team members who are most familiar with the existing infrastructure to gauge the potential risks. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that identifies potential threats, analyzes their likelihood and impact on service availability and data integrity, and develops mitigation strategies. Option D. Postpone the risk assessment until after the upgrade is completed to avoid delaying the potential performance benefits. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that identifies potential threats, analyzes their likelihood and impact on service availability and data integrity, and develops mitigation strategies. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT service management where a proposed change, while offering potential benefits, also carries inherent risks that could impact service availability and data integrity. The professional challenge lies in balancing the desire for innovation and improvement with the imperative to maintain stable and secure IT operations, adhering to established change management principles and regulatory compliance. A rigorous risk assessment is paramount to ensure that potential negative impacts are identified, understood, and mitigated before a change is implemented. The correct approach involves a systematic and comprehensive evaluation of the potential risks associated with the proposed change. This includes identifying threats, vulnerabilities, likelihood of occurrence, and potential impact on business services and data. It requires engaging relevant stakeholders to gather diverse perspectives and using established risk assessment methodologies to quantify or qualify the risks. This aligns with best practices in IT service management, particularly within frameworks like ITIL, which is implicitly referenced by the exam's focus on change, configuration, and release management, and any applicable regulatory guidelines that mandate due diligence in managing IT changes to protect business operations and data. By proactively identifying and planning for mitigation strategies, this approach ensures that the change is implemented in a controlled manner, minimizing disruption and safeguarding against potential breaches or service failures, thereby upholding professional responsibility and regulatory compliance. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the potential benefits without a thorough risk assessment fails to uphold the principle of due diligence. This could lead to unforeseen service disruptions, data loss, or security vulnerabilities, potentially violating regulatory requirements that mandate the protection of sensitive information and the assurance of service continuity. Another incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or the opinions of a few individuals, rather than a structured assessment, lacks the objectivity and rigor required for sound decision-making. This can result in overlooking critical risks that might be apparent to a broader group or through systematic analysis, leading to non-compliance with change management policies and potentially regulatory mandates. An approach that delays or avoids the risk assessment process altogether is a direct contravention of responsible change management practices and can expose the organization to significant operational and reputational damage, as well as regulatory penalties. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes a structured and documented risk assessment as a mandatory prerequisite for any significant IT change. This framework should involve defining the scope of the assessment, identifying all potential risks, analyzing their likelihood and impact, developing mitigation plans, and obtaining formal approval based on the risk assessment outcomes. This systematic process ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with both organizational objectives and regulatory obligations. Question 12. The review process indicates that a proposed change to a critical business services configuration within IBM SmartCloud Control Desk v7.5 is being fast-tracked due to urgent business demand. The change initiator has provided a brief justification stating it is a minor adjustment with minimal impact. What is the most appropriate approach to risk assessment in this scenario? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that identifies potential impacts on all affected systems, services, and business processes, documents findings, and informs mitigation strategies before approving the change. Option B. Perform a superficial risk assessment focusing only on the immediate technical components directly modified and assume no downstream or indirect impacts will occur. Option C. Rely on the change initiator's subjective categorization of the change as minor and approve it without further independent risk evaluation, assuming the initiator has considered all relevant factors. Option D. Accept the change initiator's assessment of minimal impact and proceed with the change, deferring any detailed risk analysis until after the change has been implemented. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that identifies potential impacts on all affected systems, services, and business processes, documents findings, and informs mitigation strategies before approving the change. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for rapid change implementation with the imperative to thoroughly assess potential risks. In the context of IBM SmartCloud Control Desk v7.5 change configuration release management, a failure to adequately assess risks can lead to service disruptions, data corruption, security vulnerabilities, and significant financial or reputational damage. The pressure to expedite a release especially if perceived as minor, can tempt teams to bypass or abbreviate the risk assessment process, which is a common pitfall. Professional judgment is crucial to ensure that the urgency of the business need does not compromise the integrity and stability of the IT environment. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a structured and comprehensive risk assessment that considers the potential impact of the change on all relevant IT components and business processes. This aligns with best practices in IT service management (ITSM) frameworks, which emphasize proactive risk management. Specifically, within the scope of IBM SmartCloud Control Desk, a robust risk assessment would involve identifying potential threats, vulnerabilities, and their likelihood and impact. This process should inform the decision-making regarding the change's approval, the necessary mitigation strategies, and contingency plans. By systematically evaluating risks, the organization can make informed decisions to prevent or minimize negative consequences, thereby ensuring the stability and availability of services, which is a fundamental ethical and professional responsibility in IT management. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume that a change is low risk solely because it is categorized as minor or affects a limited number of users. This is a regulatory and ethical failure because it relies on subjective categorization rather than objective risk analysis. Regulatory frameworks and professional ethics demand a data-driven and evidence-based approach to risk assessment, not assumptions. Another incorrect approach is to defer the risk assessment to a later stage, such as post-implementation. This is professionally unacceptable as it violates the principle of proactive risk management. It means that potential issues are not identified and mitigated before they can cause harm, leading to reactive problem solving, which is less efficient and more costly, and potentially causing significant service degradation or outages, a breach of professional duty. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on the change initiator's assessment without independent validation. This introduces bias and overlooks potential blind spots, failing to meet the professional standard of due diligence, and potentially leading to the approval of risky changes that could have been identified and mitigated with an independent review. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making process that prioritizes a systematic and objective risk assessment for all changes, regardless of perceived impact. This involves 1. Clearly defining the scope of the risk assessment, including all affected systems, services, and business processes. 2. Utilizing established risk assessment methodologies and tools available within IBM SmartCloud Control Desk or aligned ITSM frameworks. 3. Ensuring that risk assessments are conducted by qualified personnel, potentially involving cross-functional teams. 4. Documenting the risk assessment process, findings, and mitigation plans thoroughly. 5. Establishing clear criteria for risk acceptance and escalation. 6. Regularly reviewing and updating risk assessment procedures to incorporate lessons learned and evolving threats. This structured approach ensures that decisions are based on a comprehensive understanding of potential impacts, thereby upholding professional responsibility and regulatory compliance. Question 13. The analysis reveals that a critical business application requires an urgent update to address a newly discovered security vulnerability. The development team has a patch ready, but the standard change management process, which includes extensive regression testing and multiple levels of approval, would delay deployment by several days. Given the severity of the vulnerability, what is the most professionally responsible approach to managing this change? Option A. Expedite the deployment of the patch after a focused risk assessment and targeted testing, ensuring all critical functionalities are validated, and document the deviation from the full process with clear justification. Option B. Inform management that the standard process must be followed, even if it means the vulnerability remains unaddressed for several days, to avoid any deviation from established procedures. Option C. Deploy the patch immediately without any formal testing or documentation, as the security risk outweighs the need for process adherence. Option D. Implement the patch as a temporary workaround and postpone the official change request until after the immediate security threat has passed. The correct answer is A. Expedite the deployment of the patch after a focused risk assessment and targeted testing, ensuring all critical functionalities are validated, and document the deviation from the full process with clear justification. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT service management. balancing the need for rapid change deployment with the imperative of maintaining service stability and compliance. Pressure to deliver new features quickly can lead to shortcuts in the change management process, potentially increasing the risk of incidents, security vulnerabilities, and non-compliance with established governance frameworks. The professional challenge lies in advocating for and implementing robust best practices within a potentially time-constrained or resource-limited environment, ensuring that the organization's IT services remain reliable, secure, and auditable. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a structured, risk-based evaluation of proposed changes. This aligns directly with the principles of ITIL, Information Technology Infrastructure Library, which is the foundational framework for IBM SmartCloud Control Desk. Specifically, it promotes a thorough assessment of the potential impact of a change on the business, the technical environment, and security. This includes verifying that all necessary documentation, testing, and approvals are in place before implementation. This methodology ensures that changes are implemented in a controlled manner, minimizing disruption and adhering to the governance requirements inherent in a regulated environment. The focus on risk mitigation and adherence to established processes is paramount for maintaining service integrity and compliance. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves prioritizing speed of deployment over thorough risk assessment and testing. This directly violates best practices by increasing the likelihood of introducing defects or security vulnerabilities into the production environment. Such an approach could lead to service outages, data breaches, and significant financial or reputational damage, all of which would be considered regulatory and ethical failures in a controlled IT environment. Another incorrect approach is to bypass formal change approval processes for minor changes without a clear, documented, and agreed-upon definition of what constitutes minor and the associated risk tolerance. This creates ambiguity and opens the door to subjective decision-making, which can lead to unauthorized or poorly understood changes being implemented. This lack of formal governance is a significant ethical and regulatory failure, as it undermines the audit trail and accountability required for IT operations. A third incorrect approach is to neglect post-implementation review and validation. Even if a change is implemented without immediate issues, failing to verify its successful integration and performance can mask underlying problems that may surface later. This oversight can lead to recurring incidents and a lack of continuous improvement, representing a failure to uphold professional responsibility for service quality and stability. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making process that begins with understanding the organizational context and the specific requirements of the change. This involves identifying all stakeholders and their concerns. The next step is to apply a risk-based methodology, assessing the potential impact of the change against predefined criteria. This assessment should inform the level of scrutiny and testing required. Adherence to established change management procedures, including proper documentation, testing, and approval workflows, is non-negotiable. Finally, a commitment to continuous improvement through post-implementation reviews ensures that lessons learned are incorporated into future change processes. This systematic approach fosters trust, ensures compliance, and ultimately leads to more stable and reliable IT services. Question 14. Benchmark analysis indicates that an organization has implemented IBM SmartCloud Control Desk v7.5 for change configuration release management. Which of the following evaluation approaches best demonstrates a commitment to best practices and regulatory compliance in assessing the effectiveness of this implementation? Option A. Confirming that all users have been trained on the basic functionalities of IBM SmartCloud Control Desk v7.5, and that the system is technically operational without any reported bugs. Option B. Reviewing the system's audit logs to ensure that all changes made to the configuration items are recorded, and that the system's performance metrics meet the vendor's specified benchmarks. Option C. Evaluating the number of change requests logged and closed within the system, and verifying that all mandatory fields in the change record are populated. Option D. Assessing the integration of IBM SmartCloud Control Desk v7.5 with the organization's overall IT service management (ITSM) strategy, the effectiveness of the Change Advisory Board (CAB) in risk assessment and decision-making, and the clarity of release planning and execution procedures. The correct answer is C. Evaluating the number of change requests logged and closed within the system, and verifying that all mandatory fields in the change record are populated. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge in evaluating the effectiveness of a change configuration release management implementation against established best practices, specifically within the context of IBM SmartCloud Control Desk V7. 5. The core difficulty lies in moving beyond a superficial checklist of features to a nuanced assessment of how the implemented processes and tools actually contribute to desired outcomes like reduced risk, improved stability, and faster delivery of changes. Professionals must exercise careful judgment to discern genuine alignment with best practices from mere adherence to procedural steps. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it focuses on measurable outcomes and the underlying principles of effective change management. It involves a holistic review that considers the integration of the IBM Smart Cloud Control Desk V7. 5. Implementation with existing IT service management (ITSM) frameworks, the maturity of the organization's change advisory board (CAB) processes, and the effectiveness of the release planning and execution stages. This approach aligns with the implicit regulatory and ethical obligation to ensure that changes are managed in a way that minimizes disruption and maintains service integrity, thereby protecting the organization's operational continuity and data security. It demonstrates a commitment to continuous improvement and a proactive stance in identifying areas for enhancement, which is a hallmark of professional responsibility in IT governance. Incorrect approaches fail to meet professional standards by either focusing on superficial metrics, neglecting critical integration points, or misinterpreting the purpose of specific controls. One incorrect approach might focus solely on the number of changes processed through the system, ignoring the success rate or the impact of those changes. This is a regulatory failure because it prioritizes volume over quality and risk mitigation, potentially leading to an increase in incidents and service degradation, which can have significant financial and reputational consequences. Another incorrect approach might overlook the importance of the CAB's effectiveness, treating it as a mere administrative gatekeeper rather than a critical decision-making body for risk assessment. This represents an ethical failure as it undermines the principle of due diligence in approving changes that could impact service availability and security. A third incorrect approach might concentrate on the technical configuration of IBM Smart Cloud Control Desk V7. 5. Without assessing how it supports the broader organizational change management strategy. This is a professional failure because it demonstrates a lack of strategic thinking and an inability to connect technical implementation to business objectives and risk management. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured evaluation framework that includes 1. Defining clear objectives for the change management implementation. 2. Identifying key performance indicators, KPI, that measure success against these objectives. 3. Assessing the alignment of the implementation with relevant ITSM frameworks and organizational policies. 4. Evaluating the effectiveness of human processes and decision-making bodies, like the CAB. And 5. Seeking feedback from stakeholders to identify areas for improvement. This systematic approach ensures that the evaluation is comprehensive, objective, and focused on delivering tangible value and mitigating risks. Question 15. The audit findings indicate that the change, configuration, and release management processes implemented using IBM Smart Cloud Control Desk V7. 5 are not consistently aligned with industry best practices, leading to an increased risk of unauthorized modifications and service disruptions. Which of the following approaches best addresses this situation to ensure ongoing compliance and operational stability? Option A. Implement a policy that allows experienced technical staff to bypass formal change control procedures for urgent fixes, provided they document the changes retrospectively. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive review of current change, configuration, and release management procedures. Benchmark them against established ITSM frameworks and IBM Smart Cloud Control Desk V7. 5 best practices, and implement targeted improvements based on data analysis and stakeholder feedback. Option C. Prioritize the acceleration of release cycles by reducing the number of required testing and validation steps to meet perceived business demands for faster deployment. Option D. Immediately deploy a new, advanced automation tool for change and release management, assuming it will inherently resolve all identified process gaps and improve efficiency. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive review of current change, configuration, and release management procedures. Benchmark them against established ITSM frameworks and IBM SmartCloud Control Desk V7. 5 best practices, and implement targeted improvements based on data analysis and stakeholder feedback. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential gap in the organization's adherence to best practices for change, configuration, and release management within IBM SmartCloud Control Desk V7. 5. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced understanding of how to balance the need for robust control and compliance with the imperative for agility and efficient service delivery. Misinterpreting or misapplying best practices can lead to either excessive bureaucracy that stifles innovation or insufficient controls that increase risk. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the identified audit findings by proposing a structured, iterative review and refinement of existing processes. This aligns with the principles of continuous improvement inherent in IT service management, ITSM, frameworks, which are implicitly supported by the operational guidelines for IBM Smart Cloud Control Desk. By focusing on a data-driven assessment of current practices against established benchmarks and incorporating feedback loops, this approach ensures that changes are not only compliant but also effective and efficient. It prioritizes risk mitigation through controlled enhancements and stakeholder alignment, which are critical for maintaining service stability and meeting business objectives. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on implementing new, unproven technologies without a thorough assessment of their impact on existing workflows would be professionally unacceptable. This fails to consider the integration challenges and potential disruption to current operations, violating the principle of controlled change. Another incorrect approach that involves bypassing established change control procedures to expedite fixes, even with good intentions, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This undermines the integrity of the change management process, increases the risk of unintended consequences, and can lead to non-compliance with internal policies and potentially external regulations if service disruptions occur. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over thorough testing and validation, even if it appears to resolve an immediate issue, is also professionally unsound. It neglects the fundamental requirement for ensuring the stability and reliability of the IT environment, thereby increasing the likelihood of future incidents and potential breaches of service-level agreements. Professionals should approach such situations by first thoroughly understanding the audit findings and their root causes. This involves gathering data, consulting relevant documentation, including the IBM Smart Cloud Control Desk V7, 5 implementation guidelines, and engaging with stakeholders. The decision-making process should then involve evaluating potential solutions against established best practices, considering their impact on risk, efficiency, and compliance. A phased, iterative approach that allows for testing and feedback is generally preferred over radical, untested changes. Prioritizing solutions that demonstrate a clear alignment with both operational efficiency and risk management principles is paramount. Question 16. During the evaluation of a critical production incident requiring an immediate fix, a change manager is presented with a request to implement a solution that deviates from the standard change request workflow. The proposed solution has been verbally approved by a senior IT director, but no formal documentation or approval has been entered into IBM Smart Cloud Control Desk V7. 5. What is the most appropriate course of action for the change manager to ensure compliance with best practices and regulatory frameworks for change management? Option A. Document the change in a separate log file and inform the IT director that formal system entry will be completed at a later date when system load is reduced. Option B. Implement the change immediately based on the verbal approval from the senior IT director, as service restoration is the highest priority. Option C. Create a standard change request and expedite its approval process, assuming it can be retroactively justified. Option D. Initiate the formal emergency change process with an IBM Smart Cloud Control Desk V7. 5. Ensuring all required justification, risk assessment, and post-implementation review steps are completed, even if expedited. Correct answer is D. Initiate the formal emergency change process with an IBM Smart Cloud Control Desk V7. 5. Ensuring all required justification, Risk assessment and post-implementation review steps are completed, even if expedited. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT service management, balancing the need for robust change control with the imperative of rapid service delivery. The pressure to quickly implement a critical fix for a production issue, while simultaneously adhering to established change management processes, creates a tension that requires careful judgment. The challenge lies in determining the most appropriate method to document and approve the emergency change without compromising the integrity of the change management system or introducing undue risk. The professional must navigate the defined processes, understand the implications of deviating from them, and ensure that the chosen path aligns with both operational needs and governance requirements. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves utilizing the emergency change process as defined within IBM SmartCloud Control Desk V7. 5. This process is specifically designed to handle urgent changes that are necessary to restore service or prevent a major incident. It typically involves a streamlined approval workflow, often with post-implementation review and documentation requirements. This best practice ensures that critical issues are addressed promptly while still maintaining a record of the change, its justification, and its impact. Adherence to this process demonstrates professional responsibility by prioritizing service availability while mitigating risks through a controlled, albeit expedited, mechanism. It aligns with the principles of ITIL, Information Technology Infrastructure Library, which underpins many ITSM frameworks, emphasizing the importance of a structured approach to change management, even in urgent situations. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the change without any formal documentation or approval bypasses the fundamental controls of change management. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure, as it creates an undocumented change, making it impossible to track, audit, or roll back if necessary. It increases the risk of introducing further instability and violates the principle of accountability. Attempting to shoehorn the emergency change into a standard change request process without following the emergency change procedures is also problematic. Standard change processes are typically designed for pre-approved, low-risk changes and may not have the necessary urgency or approval levels for a critical production fix. This can lead to delays, missed critical windows, and ultimately, a failure to restore service effectively, which is a professional failing in service delivery. Furthermore, it can create a false sense of compliance by using a process that is not fit for purpose in this urgent context. Proving the change based solely on verbal communication from a senior stakeholder without any formal record in the system represents a failure in due diligence and auditability. While the stakeholder may have authority, the lack of documented justification, risk assessment, and approval within the official system creates a gap in governance. This makes it difficult to demonstrate compliance, investigate issues retrospectively, and learn from the change, all of which are critical for continuous improvement and risk management. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by first understanding the urgency and impact of the proposed change. They must then consult the established IBM SmartCloud Control Desk V7. 5 Change Configuration Release Management Implementation Guidelines to identify the most appropriate process for the situation. In cases of critical production issues, the emergency change process is the designated pathway. The decision-making process should prioritize service restoration while ensuring that all necessary documentation and approvals, even if expedited, are captured within the system to maintain auditability and accountability. If the existing emergency change process is deemed insufficient, the professional should escalate to management to review and potentially revise the process, rather than unilaterally deviating from it. Question 17. The performance metrics show a significant increase in emergency changes, a rise in failed changes, and a decrease in the successful deployment rate of planned releases. Which of the following approaches best addresses this situation to improve overall IT service delivery and stability? Option A. Halt all emergency changes for the next month to force a return to the standard plan change process, regardless of the impact on incident resolution. Option B. Assign blame to the teams responsible for the failed changes and mandate additional training for them without investigating the underlying process or environmental factors. Option C. Immediately increase the approval speed for all emergency changes to ensure critical issues are resolved faster, while deferring any process reviews until the current backlog is cleared. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive review of the change, configuration, and release management processes to identify root causes for the increase in emergency changes and failed deployments, and implement targeted improvements based on findings. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive review of the change, configuration, and release management processes to identify root causes for the increase in emergency changes and failed deployments, and implement targeted improvements based on findings. Explanation: the performance metrics show a significant increase in the number of emergency changes implemented over the past quarter, alongside a rise in failed changes and a decrease in the successful deployment rate of planned releases. This scenario is professionally challenging because it indicates a potential breakdown in the change, configuration, and release management processes, which are critical for maintaining service stability and meeting business objectives. The tension lies in balancing the need for rapid response to urgent issues, emergency changes, with the imperative to maintain control, predictability, and quality in the overall IT service delivery. Careful judgment is required to diagnose the root causes and implement corrective actions without stifling necessary agility or introducing further risk. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic, data-driven investigation into the underlying causes of the increased emergency changes and failed releases. This involves a thorough review of the change approval process, risk assessment procedures, testing methodology, and post-implementation reviews. By focusing on identifying systemic weaknesses, such as inadequate testing environments, insufficient resource allocation for planned changes, or a lack of clear escalation paths for emergency requests, the organization can implement targeted improvements. This aligns with the principles of ITIL, Information Technology Infrastructure Library, best practices, which are implicitly expected in a smart cloud control desk implementation context, emphasizing continuous improvement and risk mitigation. Adhering to these principles ensures that changes are managed effectively, minimizing disruption and maximizing the likelihood of successful deployments, thereby supporting business continuity and service availability. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on increasing the speed of emergency change approvals without addressing the root causes of their proliferation would be professionally unacceptable. This would likely lead to more uncontrolled changes, increased risk of service outages, and potential noncompliance with internal policies and potentially regulatory requirements if service disruption impacts regulated operations. Another incorrect approach, such as halting all emergency changes to force a return to planned processes, would be professionally unsound, as it fails to acknowledge the legitimate need for rapid response to critical incidents and could severely impact business operations. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of incident management and its relationship with change management. A third incorrect approach, which involves blaming individual teams for the failures without a comprehensive process review, is ethically problematic and professionally damaging. It fosters a culture of fear and discourages open communication and collaboration, hindering the identification of systemic issues and the implementation of effective solutions. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Acknowledge and validate the performance data. 2. Initiate a cross-functional investigation involving change management, incident management, release management, and relevant technical teams. 3. Focus on identifying root causes through process analysis, not just symptom management. 4. Prioritize solutions that address systemic issues and promote continuous improvement. 5. Communicate findings and proposed actions transparently to stakeholders. 6. Implement changes to processes and controls and monitor their effectiveness. Question 18. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a significantly streamlined change approval process for low-risk modifications could yield substantial operational cost savings and reduce change lead times. However, this streamlined process involves fewer mandatory review gates and automated checks compared to the current established procedures within IBM SmartCloud Control Desk v7. 5. Considering the need to maintain service stability and adhere to best practices in change configuration release management, which of the following represents the most prudent and professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Reject the proposed streamlined process entirely, as any deviation from established, proven change management procedures inherently increases risk and is not justifiable. Option B. Conduct a pilot program of the streamlined change approval process for a defined subset of low-risk changes, rigorously monitoring key performance indicators and risk metrics before a full rollout. Option C. Implement the streamlined change approval process immediately for all low-risk changes, prioritizing the identified cost savings and efficiency gains. Option D. Focus solely on the cost-benefit analysis figures, assuming that the projected savings are sufficient justification to bypass the current review gates and automated checks. The correct answer is C. Implement the streamlined change approval process immediately for all low-risk changes, prioritizing the identified cost savings and efficiency gains. Explanation: this scenario presents a common challenge in IT service management, balancing the desire for rapid change with the need for robust risk management and compliance. The professional challenge lies in interpreting the results of a cost-benefit analysis within the context of IBM SmartCloud Control Desk V7. 5's change, configuration, and release management implementation, specifically adhering to the implied regulatory framework of the exam, which, without explicit mention, we assume aligns with general IT governance, best practices, and potentially industry-specific regulations relevant to IT service delivery. The core difficulty is determining whether the perceived cost savings of a streamlined process outweigh the potential risks associated with reduced oversight, especially when considering the impact on service stability and regulatory adherence. The correct approach emphasizes a balanced perspective, recognizing that while cost-benefit analysis is a valuable tool, it must be integrated with a comprehensive risk assessment and a thorough understanding of the organization's change management policies and regulatory obligations. This approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes service integrity and compliance. By advocating for a phased implementation or a pilot program, it allows for the validation of the cost-benefit claims in a controlled environment, minimizing the risk of widespread disruption. This aligns with the principles of ITIL, Information Technology Infrastructure Library, which underpins many IT service management frameworks by promoting a structured and risk-aware approach to change. It also implicitly addresses potential regulatory requirements for auditable change processes and demonstrable due diligence in managing IT infrastructure. Incorrect approaches fail by either overemphasizing cost savings at the expense of risk or by rigidly adhering to a process without considering the strategic benefits. An approach that immediately adopts the streamlined process without further validation ignores the potential for unforeseen negative consequences, such as increased incident rates or compliance breaches, which could lead to significant financial penalties or reputational damage. This represents a failure to exercise due diligence and a disregard for the principles of risk management. Another incorrect approach might be to dismiss the cost-benefit analysis entirely, clinging to existing, potentially inefficient processes. This demonstrates a lack of adaptability and an unwillingness to embrace improvements that could enhance efficiency and reduce operational costs, potentially hindering the organization's competitive advantage and failing to meet objectives for operational excellence. Both incorrect approaches fail to demonstrate a professional decision-making process that integrates financial considerations with operational stability and regulatory compliance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Understanding the business objectives driving the change. 2. Thoroughly evaluating the cost-benefit analysis, questioning assumptions and identifying potential hidden costs or risks. 3. Conducting a comprehensive risk assessment, considering the impact on service availability, security, and compliance. 4. Reviewing existing policies and regulatory requirements to ensure any proposed changes are compliant. 5. Considering a phased or pilot approach to test the effectiveness and impact of the proposed changes. 6. Documenting the decision-making process and the rationale behind the chosen course of action. Question 19. Regulatory review indicates that an organization is seeking to evaluate the effectiveness of its IBM SmartCloud Control Desk V7. 5. Change configuration, release management implementation. Which of the following approaches would best demonstrate a professional and compliant evaluation of the process's success? Option A. Analyzing key performance indicators such as change success rate, incident volume directly attributable to changes, and frequency of emergency change approvals. Option B. Reviewing the completeness of change request documentation against a predefined checklist, irrespective of the outcome of the deployed changes. Option C, measuring the time taken from change request submission to the final approval gate, focusing solely on reducing the approval cycle time. Option D, gathering informal feedback from application owners regarding their satisfaction with the speed of change approvals. Correct answer is A, analyzing key performance indicators such as change success rate, incident volume directly attributable to changes, and frequency of emergency change approvals. Explanation: this scenario presents a common challenge in IT service management, balancing the need for rapid change deployment with the imperative to maintain stability and compliance. The professional challenge lies in evaluating different approaches to assessing the effectiveness of a change management process within the context of IBM SmartCloud Control Desk V7. 5. The chosen approach must not only align with best practices for change configuration release management, but also adhere to the implicit regulatory and compliance expectations inherent in such systems, even if specific external regulations are not explicitly cited for this exam. The goal is to ensure that changes are managed in a controlled, auditable, and effective manner, minimizing risk and maximizing business value. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it focuses on objective, data-driven evaluation of the change management process itself. By analyzing key performance indicators, KPI, directly related to change success rates, incident impact, and rollback frequency, it provides concrete evidence of the process's effectiveness and identifies areas for improvement. This aligns with the principles of continuous improvement and demonstrates due diligence in managing IT services. It ensures that the change process is not just a set of documented procedures, but a living, breathing mechanism that demonstrably contributes to service stability and business objectives, which is a core tenet of effective IT governance. An incorrect approach that relies solely on anecdotal feedback from change requesters fails to provide objective data. This is professionally unacceptable because it is subjective, prone to bias, and does not offer a comprehensive view of the change process's impact on the overall IT environment. It neglects the critical aspect of operational stability and the potential for unintended consequences that may not be immediately apparent to the requester. Another incorrect approach that focuses exclusively on the speed of change approval, without considering the success or impact of the deployed changes, is also professionally unsound. This prioritizes throughput over quality and risk management, potentially leading to an increase in failed changes, service disruptions, and ultimately, greater business impact. It violates the fundamental principle of change management, which is to enable beneficial changes to be made with minimum disruption to IT services. A third incorrect approach that emphasizes adherence to documentation without measuring actual outcomes is insufficient. While documentation is important for auditability and consistency, it does not guarantee the effectiveness of the change process. A process can be perfectly documented, but still lead to poor results if the underlying procedures are flawed or not effectively implemented. This approach misses the opportunity to identify and rectify systemic issues that impact service delivery. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured, data-driven evaluation. First, clearly define the objectives of the change management process. Second, identify relevant metrics that directly measure the achievement of these objectives. Third, collect and analyze data related to these metrics. Fourth, use the insights gained from the data analysis to identify strengths, weaknesses, and areas for improvement. Finally, implement corrective actions and continuously monitor their effectiveness. This iterative process ensures that the change management framework remains robust, efficient, and aligned with business needs. Question 20. The audit findings indicate that the implemented IBM SmartCloud Control Desk V7 5 change configuration release management process lacks robust integration of automated testing within the release pipeline, leading to a higher than acceptable rate of production incidents post-release. What is the most professionally sound approach to address this deficiency? Option A. Defer the integration of automated testing until a future project phase, citing current resource limitations and the complexity of the task. Option B. Develop and deploy automated testing scripts independently of the SmartCloud Control Desk workflow, focusing solely on individual application components. Option C. Implement a phased integration of automated testing, prioritizing critical path changes and gradually expanding coverage to ensure stability and minimize disruption. Option D. Immediately mandate comprehensive automated testing for all change types across the entire release pipeline to achieve full compliance. The correct answer is C. Implement a phased integration of automated testing, prioritizing critical path changes and gradually expanding coverage to ensure stability and minimize disruption. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge where a critical component of the change configuration release management process, specifically the integration of automated testing into the release pipeline, has been overlooked during the initial deployment of IBM SmartCloud Control Desk v7. 5. The audit findings highlight a gap in ensuring the quality and stability of releases, which directly impacts business continuity and compliance. The challenge lies in retrofitting this essential functionality without disrupting ongoing operations or compromising the integrity of existing change records and configurations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased integration of automated testing, starting with critical path changes and gradually expanding coverage. This aligns with best practices in release management by prioritizing risk reduction and ensuring that the most impactful changes are validated early. It demonstrates a commitment to continuous improvement and adherence to the principles of robust change control, minimizing the potential for introducing defects into production. This approach also allows for iterative refinement of the automated testing framework and its integration points within SmartCloud Control Desk, ensuring a sustainable and effective solution. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves a complete, immediate overhaul of the release pipeline to incorporate comprehensive automated testing across all change types. This is professionally unacceptable, as it introduces significant risk of disruption to ongoing business operations and could lead to a backlog of changes due to the complexity and potential unforeseen issues during a large-scale implementation. It fails to consider the practicalities of a live production environment and the need for a controlled, phased rollout. Another incorrect approach is to defer the integration of automated testing indefinitely, citing resource constraints or the perceived complexity. This is ethically and professionally unsound, as it knowingly ignores a critical control gap identified by the audit. It directly contradicts the principles of effective risk management and quality assurance inherent in change and release management, potentially leading to future incidents, increased downtime, and reputational damage. A third incorrect approach is to implement automated testing in a siloed manner, without proper integration into the SmartCloud Control Desk workflows and reporting mechanisms. This would result in fragmented visibility into the release process, making it difficult to track the effectiveness of testing, identify bottlenecks, or provide comprehensive audit trails. It fails to leverage the capabilities of the integrated platform and undermines the holistic nature of change and release management. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing this situation should adopt a structured, risk-based approach. First, thoroughly assess the impact of the identified gap and prioritize remediation efforts based on the criticality of changes and the potential business impact of failures. Second, develop a detailed implementation plan that includes clear objectives, phased milestones, resource allocation, and rollback strategies. Third, engage relevant stakeholders, including development, operations, and audit teams, to ensure buy-in and alignment. Finally, continuously monitor the effectiveness of the implemented solution and adapt the strategy as needed, fostering a culture of continuous improvement in the change and release management process.